This is a different type of offseason for the Cleveland Browns organization. The familiar questionnaire is currently unavailable. Us die-hard dog pound fans know it well. Who is the QB of the future? Baker Mayfield has proven he is more than qualified, capable, and willing to excel at the position. Who are the offensive playmakers available to the quarterback? Let us see. Wide receivers Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Juice Landry, running backs Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, plus tight end Austin Hooper. They are the main options. Who will coach the team? Coach Kevin Stefanski has proven in his first year as leading man that he can more than handle the job. Are these players and this coach long-term solutions? The answers are yes, 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 emphatically. So what makes this Cleveland offseason so unique? Well, first, let us Cleveland football fan natives be grateful that this year's NFL draft will be held and hosted by the great city of Cleveland, Ohio. And unsurprisingly, depending, the home team Browns do not pick at the top 25 for the first time in 26 years. Let me say this again. The home team Browns do not pick in the top 25 for the first time in 26 years. The last time they picked outside the top 25 was 1995, when they drafted a linebacker named Craig Powell out of the University of Ohio State. And ironically, the Browns have the 26th overall pick in the first round of this year's draft. By the way, the NFL draft will be aired live across various ESPN networks starting Thursday night, April 29th, 2021 at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific with the first round. Rounds 2 and 3 will be aired on Friday night, April 30th. And rounds 4 through 7 will be aired Saturday afternoon, May 1st, which will be the conclusion. So with so much unfamiliar territory that this Cleveland Browns organization is facing coming into the 2021 offseason, I guess some of us are wondering, what is the team's number one priority headed into the offseason? The defensive side of the ball. Which now brings me to who I feel like is under the spotlight right now. This Cleveland Browns front office. Football operations leader John DePodesta and second-year general manager Andrew Berry specifically. Their savvy Ivy League business minds have quite a bit to digest in another pandemic-led offseason. Last year, these two gentlemen signed right tackle Jack Conklin away from the Tennessee Titans. He turned out to be a great compliment to their then number 10 overall draft pick left tackle Jedrick Willis out of Alabama. They also signed tight end Austin Hooper away from the Atlanta Falcons, and he ended up becoming the legitimate tight end receiving threat the Browns offense needed to complement running backs Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, who anchored a ground attack. They also drafted at number 44 overall top safety prospect Grant Delpit out of LSU in the second round. At 88, they drafted defensive tackle Jordan Elliott out of Missouri in the third round. At 97, they drafted linebacker Jacob Phillips out of LSU also in the third round. In the fourth round, they got the top tight end prospect in the draft out of Florida Atlantic, Harrison Bryant. At 160, they drafted center Nick Harris out of Washington, and that was in the fifth round. And in the sixth round, they drafted wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones at 187 out of Michigan. And to the front office's credit, every single pick was able to get meaningful playing time and make impact plays throughout this entire winning season. Mr. Berry and DePodesta also signed a plethora of one-year contract deals, bringing in safeties Carl Joseph and Andrew Sendejo, linebacker B.J. Goodson, cornerback Kevin Johnson, and defensive tackle Andrew Billings, and ended up inking a 2-year deal with edge defender Adrian Claiborne. Every signing, with the exception of Billings, also got meaningful playing time and made impact plays that contributed to this winning season. So we can say for a fact, the Browns owners, Mr. and Mrs. D and Jimmy Haslam respectfully, finally got it right. And their new hire at GM, Andrew Berry, had an extremely successful inaugural offseason. So now, most NFL franchises have an identity. Front office tactics, play style, personality pairing, etc. Well, most winning franchises do, I should say. So again, this is very, very unfamiliar territory for the Browns organization. The bulk and most impactful parts of this Browns offense are locked in through the end of the 22-23 season. So what we all want to know is, what will Mr. Berry and DePodesta do in year 2 to turn this Cleveland Browns defense into an every weekend nightmare for opposing offenses. Here's my proposed priority list for the Cleveland Browns front office. And it all starts with the defense. Now, this defense isn't terrible. I mean, they did aid the franchise to their century's best 12-6 record and was arguably 2 plays away from not only being 14-4, but also these same 2 plays from winning the division crown and playing in the AFC Conference Championship game. But this defense isn't good either. Though with all the complaints and criticism the Browns defense has garnered, one has to give credit where it is due. I personally been heavily critical about the way Cleveland Browns defensive coordinator Joe Woods has handled the personnel usage this past season. I felt like he could have given a few other guys chances to make plays versus us dog pound spectators watching a few, no need to name, players who were constantly getting caught on the wrong end of highlight reels. But let me be honest here. A first-year defensive coordinator in a pandemic year, already in a tough spot. And most times adjusting to a new job is hard, New environment, new colleagues, new supervisors, etc. So I perfectly understand that. But then you have to add, rookie safety Grant Delpit goes down for the season in an already limited training camp. Cornerback Greedy Williams goes down a week later with shoulder concerns. Then he ends up sitting out the whole year again. So now Coach Woods has to lean on 1 year and last year contract guys. Linebacker B.J. Goodson, safety Carl Joseph, cornerback Kevin Johnson, who missed the entire preseason and a few games of the regular seasons with a lacerated liver. Defensive tackle Andrew Billings, who opted out of playing in 2020 due to COVID concerns. Safety Andrew Sendejo. Third year on the team cornerback Terrence Mitchell. Third year on the team defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi, to pick up on the slack where all the original defensive scheme is dropping off. And I believe with the exception of cornerback Terrence Mitchell, every player on this defense missed a game or two. So I'm saying all that to say we have to give defensive coordinator Joe Woods his well-deserved credit for holding this defense accountable regardless of circumstance. I believe it is in the best interest of this entire team, the best interest in everybody, that the front office addresses the defense first, above anything else. As we take a look at this offseason's priority list that I designed, I want you to understand that these individual questions are just small parts to a whole. The foundation pieces that the Browns are looking to create this thing around starts with defensive end Myles Garrett and cornerback Denzel Ward. But this is the laundry list of questions General Manager Andrew Berry must find answers for. Alright? So now let's jump straight into it. With so many questions about the salary cap projections, cap casualty possibilities, the quarterback musical, and the fact that this is a more offensive heavy draft, it will become very important that the Browns manage money properly. On top of still upholding a standard of signing impact guys entering their prime and drafting talented rookies that will complement what they already have. Let's look at the projected salary cap, the Browns draft pick status for this year, and highlight all the guys that are scheduled to be released from the team upon the beginning of the new league year, which begins March 17th, 2021. Now, I personally believe they should release everybody on this list. Certain players I will potentially re-sign. But that's after I get the players I want. Some people will have a big gripe with this, and that's totally understandable. But the Browns are in a unique position, and they cannot be blindsided by sentiments. Defensive tackle or defensive lineman Larry Ogunjobi is a player I would be in favor of keeping, but he would have to play defensive end for me, opposite Myles Garrett, because the guy playing that role has to be a run stopper. Teams are going to run away from Garrett and stay out his way as much as possible. They need to know that if we go to the opposite side, it ain't really no drop off over there, and I ain't gonna really be able to get that off. All right, and I think Larry can do that. Let's look at Larry's stats for the past season. All right, Mr. Ogunjobi played 15 games. He had 45 tackles, 22 solo, 23 assist tackles, and 2.5 sacks. Now, Mr. Ogunjobi is undersized as an interior lineman, but yet he is still impactful. If the Browns feel like defensive lineman Andrew Billings can come in and be impactful, the Browns could consider letting Larry walk. But in my opinion, Larry's stats aren't reflective of his full talent and capabilities. Defensive lineman Sheldon Richardson, Andrew Billings, and second-year player Jordan Elliott could hold down the interior rotation. The star of this defensive front, Myles Garrett, can be moved anywhere along the line. Larry is fast and athletic enough to gain leverage off the edge, but he is extremely strong and good with his hand placement and feet mobility. I think moving him to defensive end and signing him to a 2-year deal will work out for both sides. This front office signed undrafted rookie defensive end Curtis Weaver to a multi-year deal for a reason, but they are still implementing this defense, and Weaver is still young and adjusting to the NFL game. Allowing Larry and Curtis to compete could be beneficial for both players and the future versatility of the defensive line. Edge defender Porter Gaston made some noise in a few plays he played throughout the season. Maybe the front office will want to keep him over Larry, because of money reasons or whatever. But between drafting and free agency, the analytics could suggest them to look elsewhere as well. So, I like Larry, And then, too, it's a certain defensive lineman that I'm going to talk about later that I would like for the Browns to target, to pair with Miles. I think this guy has a lot to bring to the table, especially with versatility, his age, his talent, his capabilities, but it's some guys coming out in the draft too, as much as I like Larry Ogunjobi, he could become too costly for this stage of building that the Browns are in. You know what I'm saying? Especially right now, this summer to start free agency. So the summer could be interesting, man. We really need to see what happens. Linebacker B.J. Goodson is somebody I would really consider resigning. He ended up the leading tackler for this Browns playoff defensive team and significantly got better in coverage as the season progressed. Now, his stats on the year, he played in 14 games. He had 87 tackles, 55 solo, 32 assists, half a sack, 6 defensive pass defenses, 2 interceptions. But BJ was by far the best tackler in his linebacking group, and I think his talents mesh well with the team scheme and as a rotation guy. But he could blossom into a Pro Bowler if his coverage skills continue to improve. The organization is not believed to want to overpay at the linebacker position, with Taki, Wilson, and Phillips being groomed for the future. B.J. Goodson could be a cost-efficient option, but B.J. would probably want, more of a longer-term deal, 3-4 years, especially being that he's only 27, versus the front office may want to give him another 1, maybe 2-year deal just so they can see where they at and they not invest their money so wildly already. Cornerback Kevin Johnson. He did a really solid job as a nickel back sub number 2 corner. Battled back from an unfortunate injury during training camp to become one of the few consistent Brown defenders. I like his game, and I think he meshed well with the young stars. Kevin Johnson's stats on the season. He played in 13 games. He had 34 tackles, 21 solo, 13 assists. Had a half a sack, was credited for. 3 pass defenses, no interceptions. But he definitely was asked to do more than he originally was signed for. And that happens in football. You're asked to do more than you think you'll have to do it. And, it is what it is. I think he filled in nicely. He's young, former number 1 pick. So he definitely has a first-round pick. Not number 1, but first-round pick. So he definitely has the talent. And he showed glimpses. He was with Buffalo for a while before we signed him. But I think bringing him back, keeping some continuity on that defense, would definitely go well. Another player that I would consider re-signing is safety Carl Joseph. All right, outside of B.J. Goodson, he was the second best tackler behind the defensive line. Okay, and towards the end of the season, really started to become a consistent playmaker week in and week out. Sticking his nose in, getting some stops when we needed them, open field tackles when we needed them, some interceptions, and he did really well. Carl Joseph's stat line for the season, 14 games, 66 tackles, 45 solo, 21 assists. He did have 4 pass defenses, 1 interception. So he was a little bit of everywhere. Him and Ronnie Harrison rotating that safety position right there, especially with all the injuries that we dealt with and the COVID concerns, man. I thought they did a really good job. I don't think neither one of them did anything to stand out to say, oh yeah, I should definitely have this spot. But they definitely made enough plays and had an impact to say, it should be them too. So it'll be interesting to see what the front offices think and how they want to play it. Though Ronnie and Carl can play either safety spot. So I like them as backups with Cedric Redwine in rotation with Grant Delpit coming back. But I feel like they need a starter. Like not like a regular starter. They need somebody who's already proven. We'll get into my free agent, candidates and things like that later on. But I just feel like they need another starter to go with them. But if you keep those two with Cedric Redwine and let him keep developing, with Grant Delpit coming back, I think they can make some noise. You just need one more starter. Unfortunate that we had to give up Jabril to get Odell. Keeping Jabril would have been awesome right now. You know what I mean? But like I said, we're gonna get in that later. Another player, it's not on the defensive side of the ball. He's actually on the offensive side of the ball. But I really like him, and he's one of our players redrafted, and I feel like we should keep him. And that's Rashard Higgins. He stepped in nicely when Odell went down, and him and Baker Mayfield have this type of synergy. On top of that, Rashard Higgins, he's only 26, right? So he's just not really entering his prime, and he already has a chemistry with the team. At 6'1", he's a little bigger than the star, so we need a bigger receiver. That's cool. And you got Donovan Peoples-Jones at 6'2". So those two could end up being the wide receivers of the future. Because, one would assume after Odell and Jarvis contracts are over, they still want to get paid big money, And by that time, I'm pretty sure Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield going to be taking up some good money. Austin will be near the end of his contract, and Conklin. That's looking far in the future. But, Rashard could find, home here and end up being the number one or number two alongside Donovan Peoples-Jones. They got the young Harrison Bryant. So them all three of them could mesh to be, the takeovers, the successors or whatnot. But these are the guys out of everybody on this list that we are cutting that I'm in most favor of keeping. I'm in most favor of bringing these guys back because having some continuity on your team, having players who are not necessarily stars but can make star-like plays, especially, week in or week out or every other week or some type of, you want to keep those guys. You know what I'm saying? You want to keep them at a cost friendly because at the end of the day, you're going to let these guys go and then you're going to go right back to replace these guys with somebody else. You feel me? So why not keep the young guys you got? You don't want to really get no younger than you already are. So keep the mature, a few of the mature guys you got. A few of these guys are going to be looking to get paid. All right. But at the end of the day, if we're going to look at this Browns defensive stats coming up and we're going to see why, the Browns need, I'm going to further explain to you why the Browns need to let everybody go, see how much money they got, see what type of, where they picking at, who's available, go through the draft, and then start signing free agents. You know what I'm saying? But we'll get into that in a second. Okay, so at this moment, the Cleveland Browns are scheduled to have about $54 million in cap room, with about $7.5 million dedicated to rookie salaries. So that leaves them with about $46 million to allocate for free agency players, player re-signings, franchise tags, extensions, etc. Now the Browns also have the 26th overall pick, the 59th overall pick, the 89th, and the 91st overall selection slots in the top 100 of the NFL draft. And still have another 5 draft selections in rounds 4 through 7. Now, this list here is a list of all the defensive players that are under contract for the Browns for the 21-22 season, which is next season. Right? The biggest questionables are cornerback Greedy Williams and safety Grant Delpit. I genuinely believe Greedy is healthy. I think it is smart to ensure that a player has been healthy for a while versus rushing him back into play. I also believe, side note, especially when that player is a scheduled part of your future. You know what I mean? I also think that Grant Delpit will recover as well. All right, so we're just gonna pencil them in for the sake of the conversation. So now let's look at the rest of the defense. All right, outside of Miles, Denzel, Greedy, Grant, and Ronnie, you have this linebacker core. Now, so many people are up in arms about the linebackers, and rightfully so to a degree. But I believe it will serve the Browns better in the long run to just add to what they already have. Regardless of what starters the team decides on at linebacker, the position will still need reserves. Who better to fit the bill than the young guys you are growing in your system? These are the potential glue guy type players who help sustain culture identities within a team. I think the Browns are in a position to grab the best players available. At the same token, between draft capital and salary cap space, the Browns can do a number of things. But continuing to look at this list, two young guys stand out to me. Defensive end Curtis Weaver and cornerback AJ Green. Both guys spent last season on the practice squad, but both players have multi-year deals, which to me suggests they will be in competing roles in this upcoming training camp. That is where we will find out if they can become starters, rotation players, special teams players, or potential free agency candidates. The competition is great, especially when every guy competing with your potential stars are already knowledgeable about the scheme being implemented. Cornerback MJ Stewart is an undrafted rookie from last year that made a name for himself by making crucial plays at very needed times. Maybe he can make some noise and find his way onto next year's final roster, but the question is, who are the potential stars that they will be competing with? Now let's jump into the list of potential draft picks, free agents that will possibly fit well in this defense.
Alright, there are a lot more interesting and insightful things I want to discuss with you all, so take the time out right now for me to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, or dislike. Leave some feedback in the comment section, and be ready to watch the next episode of Game Changer Sports Talk, live from the marvelous Hollywood Studios on the Goonie Tunes channel.